So you have to leave now. Her voice, a bare thread, snagged on the plush silence. The billionaire's lip curled. His boy wonder protege smirked. But Elena, minimum wage waitress and blacklisted forensic accountant, didn't flinch. Not yet. She wasn't saving him from choking. She was saving him from them. The fools. Rain hammered the windows of the Sovereign, but a colder storm was brewing. Marcus Thorne had no idea he wasn't buying an energy company. He was buying his own financial execution. What they didn't know? Elena recognized the seller, the man who destroyed her. Her rage, a low hum, was building, but underneath, something softer. She'd seen his kindness, a glimpse, and that flicker of humanity might just be enough to turn the tables. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. So, you have to leave now. His partner scoffed. The client smiled, but the waitress didn't budge. She wasn't trying to save him from a fire. She was trying to save him from the men at his own table. The rain on this Tuesday evening was relentless, hammering against the thick stained glass windows of the Sovereign. To Marcus Thorne, the storm was just distant percussion, a backdrop to the quiet triumph unfolding in his private booth. At 58, Marcus was the founder and CEO of Thor Industries, a private equity Goliath that specialized in infrastructure. He wasn't just wealthy, he was a kingmaker. And tonight, he was closing a legacy deal. Project Meridian, as it was CNMED, was a $100 million cash acquisition of ETH Holdings, a firm that controlled key geothermal energy rights in Eastern Europe. It was a brilliant, forward-thinking move, and it was all thanks to the young man sitting opposite him, Julian Vance. Julian, only 32, was Marcus's protégé. Recruited straight from Wharton, Julian had a mind like a steel trap and a loyalty Marcus had come to regard as familial. He trusted him. Clear's throat. In a world of vipers, Julian was the son he'd never had. The final transfer protocol is ready, Marcus, Julian said, his voice smooth and confident. He slid a sleek leather-bound portfolio across the mahogany table. Just your signature on the authorization and the wire instructions are locked. We'll have full control by morning. Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the room. The Sovereign was his preferred place for closings. It was an old-world cathedral of power, dark wood, crystal glasses so thin they hummed, and waiters who moved like ghosts. It was a place where a quiet word could topple a government or found a dynasty. He felt at home. His gaze flickered over a waitress refilling his water. She was young, perhaps late 20s, with dark, pulled-back hair and a pale, serious face. She moved with an efficiency that was almost invisible. He dismissed her from his thoughts instantly. "And Mr. Vulov," Marcus said, turning to the third man at the table, "you are certain the EU Energy Commission will ratify the permits?" Sergei Volkov smiled. It was a thin, practiced expression that didn't reach his cold gray eyes. Volkov was the seller, the enigmatic face of Ether Holdings. He was dressed in a suit so black it seemed to drink the light. Mr. Thorne Vulov purred, his accent a faint trace of Eastern Europe. "The permits are a formality. Your $100 million investment is the key. It proves to the Commission that this is a serious project, not just speculation." "It's a fortress, Marcus," Julian chimed in. "I've run the diligence myself. Ethel is clean. This is the biggest untapped energy source left on the continent. For $100 million, it's not a deal, it's a gift." Marcus liked the sound of that. He picked up his pen, a custom Mont Blanc, its gold nib hovering over the signature line. This deal would cement his legacy, clean energy, the future. The waitress Elena Petrova felt the familiar ache in her feet. 3 more tables, then she could clock out. For 14 months, this had been her life. The 12-hour shifts, the obsequious smiling, the humiliation of clearing plates for men she used to out-earn. Elena wasn't just a waitress. 2 years ago, she had been a senior forensic accountant at Diodi, one of the sharpest minds in their financial crimes division. She could trace a single dollar through 1,000 shell companies, a bloodhound for numbers. She loved the chase, the cold, hard logic of the ledger. But she had been too good. She had uncovered an anomaly in a client's books, a complex web of offshore entities. The client was powerful with connections that ran deep into politics and finance. When she presented her findings, her boss, a senior partner named Robert Davies, had shut her down. "You're seeing ghosts, Elena," he'd said, his smile paternal and dismissive. She hadn't stopped. She dug deeper, working on her own time. She found the Nexus, a shell company registered in Cyprus named Ethelred Holdings, which was itself owned by a Cayman Islands parent, MJV Capital. It was a classic fraud structure designed to launder money. She'd prepared a non-public report, a damning file she intended to take to the SEC, but before she could, she was called into HR. Anonymous complaints, erratic behavior, insubordination. She was fired, her reputation shredded. The message was clear. You saw something you shouldn't have. They blacklisted her. With a do not hire note on her file from a behemoth like DOD, her career in finance was over. So here she was serving $500 bottles of Chateau Margaux at the Sovereign just to pay her student loans. She approached the high-profile table in the corner. Booth 1, Marcus Thorne's regular spot. She kept her eyes down, her movements fluid as she refilled the water glasses. Mr. Thorne, the billionaire, Julian Vance, his right-hand man, and a third man, the client. As she reached for the client's glass, he looked up, annoyed by the interruption. Their eyes met. Elena's heart stopped. The silver water pitcher trembled in her hand. The blood drained from her face, leaving a cold, prickling sweat. She knew that face. She had stared at it for 6 months on a screen on grainy photos from corporate filings on security stills from international banks. It was Sergei Volkov, the man whose financial empire she had tried to expose, the man who had ruined her life. The pitcher in Elena's hand suddenly weighed 1,000 B. Her breath caught, a small, sharp gasp she managed to smother before it became a sound. Sergei Volkov. He was here not as a blurry image in a file, but in the flesh. His cold gray eyes dismissed her in a fraction of a second, registering her as nothing more than scenery, and turned back to Marcus Thorne. To him she was no one, a servant. To Elena, he was a monster. A visceral cold water shock ran down her spine. A flashback, sharp and brutal, blindsided her. She wasn't in the Sovereign anymore. She was in her old glass-walled office at DOT, the 44th floor, overlooking the city, the smell of stale coffee and printer toner. The screen in front of her displaying the intricate spiderweb chart she had built. It showed shell companies branching out from a central hub like rotten limbs from a dead tree. Ethelred Holdings, MJV Capital, Volkov. She remembered the meeting with her managing partner, Robert Davies. "Elena," Davies had said, his tone one of disappointment, "you're a brilliant analyst, but you're obsessed. This Ethelred entity is a legitimate private holding company. You are bordering on slander, and our client, Mr. Volkov, is extremely unhappy." "Unhappy," she had countered, her voice shaking with professional indignation. "Robert, it's a ghost. There are no assets, no employees, no physical office. It's a mailbox in Cyprus. It's receiving millions in consulting fees from construction projects that don't exist. It's textbook Heil laundering." "Enough," Davies had snapped. His fatherly mask had vanished. "Drop it. That is a direct order. You are to delete your files and you are to forget the name Volkov. Do you understand me?" She hadn't dropped it. And 2 weeks later, she was packing her desk, escorted out by security like a common criminal. Now standing at booth 1, the reality of the situation crashed into her. Volkov was here selling that same ghost company. Her eyes snapped from Volov's face to the table. The leather portfolio was open. She could read the header on the document upside down. Her mind trained to absorb and analyze data in an instant, process the words. Project Meridian Final Acquisition. Your Ethel Holdings purchaser, Thorne Industries. Sale price $100,000. Tontai sword was USD. Elena's knees went weak. It wasn't just a deal. It was the scam. The very one she was fired for trying to stop. And it wasn't for a few million in laundering. It was a $100 million heist happening right in front of her. She looked at Marcus Thorne. He was the picture of confidence, the apex predator of his world. He had no idea he was the prey. Then she looked at Julian Vance, the protégé, the trusted son. He was beaming, his face flushed with success. He raised his glass. "To project Meridian Marcus," Julian said, his voice resin running with false sincerity. "And to you, Mr. Vulov, a smooth transition." Elena watched Julian's eyes. They didn't just hold pride. They held a manic, nervous energy, a gleam of avarice she had seen 100 times in the faces of men committing fraud. He wasn't just facilitating the deal, he was selling it. He wanted Marcus to sign. A new sickening realization dawned on her. Julian Vance wasn't just fooled, he was in on it. This wasn't an acquisition. It was an inside job. Vulov, the butcher, Vance, the Judas goat, leading the lamb to slaughter. Elena forced her feet to move. She backed away from the table, her heart hammering a desperate, frantic rhythm against her ribs. She retreated to her station, a small alcove by the kitchen doors, partially hidden by a large pillar. She was trembling, not from fear, but from a white-hot, suffocating rage. They were doing it right here in the open. They were stealing $100 million, and they were going to use Marcus Thorne's own trusted advisor to do it. They were using the very same fraudulent entity that had cost her everything, her life, her career, her reputation. She watched as Marcus Thorne picked up his beautiful heavy pen. He smiled at Julian. "Well done, son. This is a new chapter for us." He lowered the pen to the signature line. Elena knew she had seconds. Time seemed to slow down. Each tick of the grandfather clock in the corner of the dining room echoed in Elena's ears like a drumbeat. "Sign, sign, sign." Marcus Thorne's hand was poised. The nib of the Mont Blanc was a millimeter from the paper. Elena's mind fractured into 1,000 wearing thoughts. "What can you do?" a voice of pure panic whispered. "You're a waitress. You are nobody. He is a billionaire. They are criminals." If she said nothing, she was safe. She would clock out, go home to her tiny barren apartment, and this night would be just another bitter memory. Volkov would never know she was here. She would live. She would keep her job. But Marcus Thorne would be ruined, not just financially. 100 million was a staggering loss even for him. Clear his throat. But his trust would be shattered. His company would be wounded, perhaps mortally, and they would win. Vulov, the man who had her blacklisted, and Davis, her old boss at Diot, who had almost certainly been paid off by Vulov to silence her and bury her report. They would all get richer, insulated by their power and corruption. The injustice of it all tasted like acid in her throat. She thought about her report, the files she had backed up on a triple encrypted drive hidden in a safety deposit box. The report that proved without a shadow of a doubt that Ethel Holdings was a phantom. "If you say something," the other voice, the one of the forensic accountant, the one that loved the truth, spoke up. "If you say something, they will destroy you." Vulov would see her. He would recognize her. He wouldn't just have her fired. A man who layers hundreds of millions of dollars doesn't leave loose ends. He had her professionally assassinated. He wouldn't hesitate to make it permanent. And Julian Vance, he looked clean-cut, an Ivy League golden boy. But to betray his mentor like this for this much money, he was just as dangerous as Vulov. He would have everything to lose if she spoke. She looked at Marcus Thorne. He was a good man. At least the press always said so. He was a philanthropist. He built hospitals, not just condos. He was from an older school of business, one that valued a handshake. He was trusting the man he saw as a son, and that trust was being turned into a weapon. The manager, a stern man named Mr. Dubois, was gliding through the dining room. If she made a scene, he would have her thrown out in a second. She'd be fired, blacklisted again. This time from the only work she could get. It's not your problem. It's the only problem that matters. The two thoughts battled, a war that lasted only 3 seconds but felt like an eternity. Marcus Thorne began the first stroke of his name. The Elena's, Clear's throat training, her ethics, her rage, and her desperate need for justice all converged in a single explosive moment of clarity. "I will not let this happen," Clear's throat. She didn't have a plan. She only knew she had to stop that pen. She pushed off the pillar, her server's tray clattering to the floor. The sound was a gunshot in the silent room. Every head turned. Mr. Dubois froze. Elena didn't care. She was already moving, walking fast, her sensible black shoes eating up the yards of plush carpet. "What is the meaning of this?" Julian Vance snapped, his head whipping around, his face a mask of fury at the interruption. Elena ignored him. Her eyes were locked on Marcus Thorne. She reached the table. Marcus looked up, his face a canvas of confusion and annoyance. The M of his name was complete, the ink still wet. "Sir," Elena said, her voice shaking, but carrying the force of her conviction, "I apologize for the intrusion." She placed her hand palm down on the document covering the signature line. Julian Vance shot to his feet. "Get your hand off that security. Get her out of here." "Sir," Elena said again, her gaze boring into Marcus. "My name is Elena Petrova. You cannot sign that." Folk said nothing. He simply watched a flicker of cold recognition dawning in his eyes. He was starting to remember her. "What did you say?" Marcus asked, his voice dangerously quiet. He hadn't tried to move her hand. He was studying her. Elena took a breath. This was it. "Sir, you have to leave now." The silence that followed Elena's words was absolute. The background din of the restaurant, the distant clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversations, all of it faded to nothing. Julian Vance's face went from red to a sickly pale white. "Marcus, this is insane. She's a disgruntled employee. She's clearly drunk." "Mr. Dubois," he yelled, "call the police. Have this woman arrested." Mr. Dubois was already rushing over his face apoplectic. "Miss Petrova, what do you think you are?" "Wait," Marcus Thorne said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the panic like a diamond. He held up a hand, silencing both Julian and the approaching manager. He didn't look at Julian, he cleared his throat, didn't look at Vulov. He looked only at Elena. Her hand was still on the document, and it was trembling, visibly. But her eyes were not insane. They were terrified, yes, but they were also lucid, intelligent, and desperate. It was the look of a Cassandra, a prophetess, cursed to see a truth no one else would. "You have 10 seconds, Marcus said, his voice flat. "Explain yourself." "Sir," Elena said, her words coming fast. "My name is Elena Petrova. 2 years ago, I was a senior forensic accountant at DOT. My job was financial crime. I was fired for investigating that man." She pointed a shaking finger at Sergei Volkov. Volkov's composure finally broke. He smiled, a thin reptilian gesture. "She's delusional. A stalker, perhaps. Julian, this farce is over." "I was fired," Elena continued, her voice gaining strength, "for writing a 300-page report on the shell company you are about to buy. Ethel Holdings. It's a ghost, Mr. Thorne. It has no assets. It has no permits. It has no employees. It is a fraudulent entity registered in Cyprus, and its sole purpose is to launder money." Marcus Thorne's blood went cold. This was not the raving of a lunatic. This was specific, too specific. Julian grabbed Elena's arm, his fingers biting into her flesh like a vice. "You're finished. You will never work in this city again." Elena wrenched her arm free and took a step back, her eyes still locked on Marcus. "Ask him," she said, nodding at Julian. "Ask Mr. Vance about the parent company, the one that really owns ETH." Marcus turned his head slowly, his gaze falling on his protege, Julian. Julian was breathing heavily, his mask of charm completely gone, replaced by the raw panic of a cornered animal. "Marcus, she's lying. She's trying to sabotage us. How would a waitress know any of this? The parent company is MJV Capital, registered in the Cayman Islands," Elena said, her voice ringing out in the quiet. "I spent 6 months trying to break its firewall. I couldn't figure out what MJV stood for, but now I see." She looked at Marcus, her expression filled with a terrible, dawning pity. "J clears throat V," she spelled out. "Marcus, Julian, Vance, thump." The heavy Mont Blanc pen slipped from Marcus Thorne's fingers and landed on the plush carpet. It wasn't ETH's parent company. It was Julian's. "Oh, Julian," Marcus Clear's throat whispered. The words were heavy with a dawning, monumental betrayal. Julian's face crumpled. Marcus, it's not what it looks like. I had debts. Vulov. He bang. Sergei Vulov was on his feet. He had overturned the table, sending crystal glasses, plates, and the $100 million document scattering across the floor. It was a violent, sudden explosion of chaos. Dmitri, Ivan, Volkov shouted. Two large men who had been sitting at a nearby table. Men Elena had assumed were just other diners shot to their feet. They were bodyguards. Stop them! Elena yelled. Vulov was already moving toward the exit. His bodyguards formed a wedge, shoving Mr. Dubois to the ground. But Marcus Thorne was no longer a victim. He was a billionaire for a reason. He didn't panic. He acted. He grabbed his phone. He didn't call 911. He hit a single number on his speed dial. Cynthia, he barked into the phone. Execute security protocol Minotaur now. Freeze every liquid asset. Freeze all transfers, domestic and international, and call the FBI. Tell them I have Julian Vance and Sergei Vulov at the Sovereign. Yes, that Volkov. Lock the building. Volkov's men were at the door, but the heavy oak doors were already being locked from the outside by the restaurant security. Alerted by the crash, Vulov turned, his face a mask of pure cold fury. He was trapped. Julian Vance had collapsed into the booth, his head in his hands, sobbing. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry. Marcus Thorne looked at him, his face carved from ice. You're sorry you got caught. He then turned to Elena, who was standing amid the wreckage, shaking from adrenaline. Ms. Petrova, he said, his voice level, I believe you just saved my company. The next 30 minutes were a blur of controlled chaos. The arrival of the NYPD, followed by two stone-faced men in dark suits who identified themselves as the FBI, turned the Sovereign from a temple of gastronomy into a crime scene. The other diners, a collection of New York's elite, were stunned into silence, watching as a man they all recognized, Julian Vance, the golden boy of Thorne Industries, was quietly handcuffed and read his rights. Sergei Volkov and his bodyguards offered no resistance. Volkov simply stood by the locked doors, his hands clasped behind his back, waiting. He knew the game was over. Marcus Thorne had Ella Lanina escorted to the restaurant's private wine cellar, a quiet, cold room that smelled of old oak and dust. He posted his personal security guard at the door and sat down opposite her at a small tasting table. The adrenaline was fading, leaving Elena feeling light-aided and nauseous. They're gone, Marcus said, his voice softer now. He handed her a bottle of water. Drink your shaking. Elena's fingers fumbled with the cap. He Volkov. He was the man I investigated. The one who got me fired from Diot. Tell me everything. Marcus said, start from the beginning. Don't leave out a single detail. And so she did. For 20 minutes, Elena laid out the entire history. She spoke of her role as a forensic accountant, her discovery of Ethel Red Holdings and the complex web of shell companies. She explained how it was a classic bust-out scheme on a corporate scale. Acquire funds for a non-existent asset, then dissolve the holding company and disappear with the cash. I found the pattern, Elena explained, her confidence returning as she spoke the language of numbers. Volkov would partner with a trusted insider at a major firm. The insider would discover the target asset, in this case, Ethler, and pitch it to their boss. They'd grease the wheels, bypass the usual due diligence, and rush the deal. The insider gets a massive kickback. Volkov gets the lion's share, and the company is left holding an empty bag. Marcus listened, his expression growing darker with every word. Julian, he, Clear's throat said, the name tasting like poison. He'd been pitching Project Meridian for 6 months. He said he found it through a private equity contact in Berlin. He said he ran the diligence himself to keep it off the books to prevent a competitor from swooping in. I thought it was initiative. I thought it was loyalty. He was the architect, Mr. Thorne, Elena said quietly. MJV Capital, Marcus Julian Vance. He was telling you in his own arrogant way. He named the parent company after you, the man he was robbing. Marcus closed his eyes. The personal betrayal hitting him harder than the financial one. The 100 million, it was a wire transfer, authorized by my signature. It would have been in an untraceable account in Moldova within seconds. By the time we realized the company was a ghost, Vulov and the money would have vanished. That's not the worst of it, Elena said. Marcus opened his eyes. What could be worse? The $100 million wasn't the goal, Mr. Thorne. It was the bait. Marcus stared at her. Explain. A transfer of that size requires a direct digital handshake between your firm's central servers and the selling bank. It's a high-level security protocol. Julian would have had the credentials to authorize it. But the bank Vulov uses, it's a front. The handshake wouldn't just be accepting a wire instruction. Elena leaned forward. It would have been a Trojan horse, a piece of malicious code, a logic bomb. The moment your system connected to theirs, it would have deployed. It wouldn't just steal the $100 million, it would have given them access to everything. The color drained from Marcus's face. Our holding accounts, our client data, our trading algorithms, all of it, Elena confirmed. This wasn't just a $100 million trap. It was a corporate assassination. They were planning to gut Thorne Industries from the inside out, short your stock, and siphon off every liquid asset you have. The $100 million was just the key to open the door. You weren't just buying a ghost company. You were signing an execution warrant for your entire firm. Marcus Thorne was silent for a full minute. He stared at the ancient wine racks, processing the sheer scale of the catastrophe she had just described. He had been hours, perhaps minutes, away from total, irreversible ruin. He finally turned back to Elena. The look in his eyes was one she had never seen before, a profound, calculated gratitude. Miss Petrova, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't just save me $100 million. You saved everything. My company, my legacy, my employees. He stood up. The FBI will need your statement and your report, the one you saved. It's in a bank vault, Elena said. I can have it for them by morning. Good, Marcus said. He pulled out his personal business card, a simple, heavy piece of cardstock with only his name and a private number. When you are finished with the police, a car will be waiting for you. It will take you wherever you want to go. A hotel, a friend's. You are not safe going back to your apartment. Elena nodded, taking the card. Then Marcus continued. At 9 a.m. tomorrow, that car will pick you up and bring you to my office. We have a great deal to discuss. Sir, you're not a waitress anymore, Ms. Petrova. Not unless you want to be. The 48 hours that followed the explosion at the Sovereign were not a media firestorm. They were a tactical, military-grade operation of information control orchestrated by Marcus Thorne. While the press was fed a thin, preliminary story of a disgruntled employee and a contained dispute, the real work was happening in a secure, windowless conference room on the 80th floor of Thor Industries. Elena Petrova had not been home. Clear's throat. She had been escorted from the restaurant by Marcus's personal security team, a quiet man named Graves, who looked like he was carved from concrete. She was brought to the headquarters, given a guest suite, and told she was now the single most valuable asset in Thorne's empire. The first meeting was with the FBI. 2 agents, a man named Sullivan and a woman named Ray, sat opposite her. Their skepticism was a tangible force in the room. So, Ms. Petrova, Agent Sullivan began, his pen tapping on his notepad. You were serving their table? Yes, Elena said. Her voice was from adrenaline, but her mind was clear. She was back in her element. And I was a senior forensic accountant at Deody for 6 years until I was fired by a partner named Robert Davies for investigating Sergei Vulov, the man at that table. Sullivan and Ray exchanged a look. This was not the story they were expecting. I assume you have proof of that, Ray said, her tone professional. I do, Elena replied. My report, the one Davies ordered me to delete. It's on a triple encrypted air-gapped hard drive. It's in a safety deposit box at the First National Branch on 53rd and Park. The key is in my apartment. My lawyer has the other. The password is the date the SEC was founded backward. It details every shell company, every ghost asset, every fraudulent transfer I found linking Vulov to Ether Red Holdings. The skepticism in the room evaporated, replaced by a cold, focused attention. Marcus Thorne, who had been listening from the corner, finally spoke. Gentlemen, Miss Ree, my team will retrieve that drive. You will have it within the hour. While the federal agents scrambled, Marcus unleashed his own team. He brought Elena to his cybersecurity hub, a room that looked like a NASA control center. The head of the department, a woman with punk blue hair named Chen, was already tearing Julian Vance's server apart, digitally speaking. "We have Elena's report," Marcus ordered. "Cross-reference her findings with the Project Meridian file on Vance's server. I want to know what I really sign." For 2 hours, Elena and Chen worked side by side, a bizarre pair, the former waitress in her borrowed Thorn Industries sweats and the blue-haired cyber chief. They spoke a language no one else in the room understood, a rapid-fire volley of code, file structures, and bank routing numbers. Finally, Chen pushed back from her keyboard, her face pale. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What?" Marcus demanded. "It wasn't $100 million heist, Mr. Thorne," Chen said, her voice shaking. "He was right. It was a $100 million trap." She pointed to a line of code buried deep within the wire transfer protocol. This is a vampire tap. It's not a logic bomb. It's worse." Elena moved closer. "A bomb explodes. A vampire. It feeds." Chen nodded, her eyes wide. "The moment you sign, the $100 million would have been the handshake. The vampire protocol would have embedded itself in our core servers. It wouldn't have stolen everything at once. It would have lived in our system. It would have siphoned off a fraction of a cent from every single one of our billion daily transactions. It would have had access to our trading algorithms, our client data, everything." Clear's throat. She looked at Marcus, the true horror of the plot settling on them. "They wouldn't have just robbed you. They would have become you. They would have known every move we were going to make, shorted our stock, and bled us dry. We would have been bankrupt in 6 months, and we'd be blaming the market the whole time." Clear throat. The room was silent. The betrayal was so total, so catastrophic, it was almost beyond comprehension. Armed with this, the FBI confronted Julian Vance. His golden boy facade shattered the moment they laid out the vampire tap code. He knew he wasn't just facing fraud. He was facing economic espionage. He broke. His confession was a torrent of pathetic, ego-driven excuses. He had gambling debts. Yes, but it was more than that. Vulov had preyed on his arrogance. "Marcus never really trusted me." Julian had wept. "According to the FBI's report, he called me son, but he never gave me the keys to the kingdom. He never saw me as his equal. So I decided to take it. The MJV capital name. That was my idea, my sick inside joke. I was using his own name to gut his company. But the most critical piece of his confession was the one that vindicated Elena completely. How did I know Marcus wouldn't find out? Julian had spat. Our auditors were in on it. A senior partner at Deote, Robert Davis. Volkov had him on the payroll for years. Davies was the one who found the last analyst who got too close. Some woman, Petrova or something. He guaranteed she'd never be a problem. That was the last piece. The conspiracy was complete. The next morning, as Elena watched the sunrise from her secure hotel suite, the news broke. Senior partner at Deote, Robert Davies, arrested by FBI in sweeping corporate fraud case. The financial world was thunderstruck. This wasn't just a rogue protege. This was a gatekeeper. The rot was inside the very firms paid to protect against it. Elena watched Robert Davies, the man who had called her erratic and obsessed, being led out of his corner office in handcuffs. A single profound shiver of vindication ran down her spine. It was over, or so she thought. That afternoon, a car took her back to Thor Industries. This time, she wasn't a witness. She was a guest. She was brought to the 80th floor main boardroom. Marcus Thorne was there, standing by the 30-foot window overlooking Central Park. He was alone. "They're all in custody," Marcus said, his voice quiet. "Julian is cooperating. He'll get 25 years. Davies is facing at least 10. The system worked." Elena stood by the door, her hands clasped. "It worked because I happened to be serving your table, Mr. Thorne. That's not a system. That's a lottery ticket." Marcus turned. He stared at her, a long appraising look, a slow nod of respect. "You're right," he said. "That is the single most terrifying part of this. It was pure dumb luck. And I am not a man who believes in luck." He walked to the massive boardroom table and motioned for her to sit. She did. "I built this company on trust," he continued. "Julian Vance proved that trust is a liability. You, Ms. Petrova, proved that distrust, professional, calculated forensic distrust, is a necessity. My auditors, my VPs, my entire M&A team, they all missed it. They were looking for a good deal. You were the only one looking for the lie. He slid a thick leather-bound folder across the table. This is not a thank you note. Elena opened it. It was an offer of employment. Her eyes scanned the page and then froze on the salary. It was a number with 7 figures, but it was the title that made her breath catch. Director, Risk and Forensic Analytics. I am not offering you a job as an accountant, Marcus said. I am offering you a division. I am creating it effective immediately. It will report directly to me and only to me. It will have full unrestricted access to every file in this company, and it will have absolute veto power over any acquisition, merger, or high-level hire. He leaned forward. Your sole purpose, Miss Petrova, is to find the lie, to ask the questions no one else dares to be the voice in my ear that says, this is too good to be true. I want you to build this division. I want you to run it. I want you to find the next Julian Vance before he ever gets a chance to sit at my table. Elena looked from the folder to the man. This wasn't just a job. It was a crown. It was a sword. It was the power to ensure that what happened to her could never happen to anyone else. I have one condition, Elena said, her voice finding a new steel-hard resonance. Marcus raised an eyebrow. My first audit won't be external. Oh, I want to audit our own people. The M&A team that approved this deal, the auditors who missed it, everyone. We have to clean our own house first. We have to find the rot before we can cut it out. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Marcus Thorne's face. It was the first time he had smiled in 2 days. Welcome to Thor Industries, Director Petrova. 6 months later, the 44th floor of the old Diote building was unrecognizable. When Marcus Thorne had told Elena he would get her Robert Davis's office, he had been literal. After the SEC indictment, Diote's New York branch was gutted by scandal. The firm was desperate to shed the physical and metaphorical stain. Marcus hadn't just bought the lease. He had bought the entire floor, transferring it to a new, nondescript subsidiary of Thorne Industries. But Elena had not simply moved in. She had it gutted. The plush, old-world carpets, the dark mahogany desks, the soft, forgiving lighting. It was all torn out. Now it was a war room. The space was open, stark, and humming with the sound of high-capacity servers. The walls were covered not with art, but with floor-to-ceiling whiteboards and massive 8K monitors displaying real-time market data, network vulnerability maps, and cascading lines of code. The only private office was Elena's, and it was encased in the same soundproof glass as the server room, its walls just as covered in data. The press, sniffing around the edges of the Von Savulov scandal, had started to hear rumors of a new shadowy division within Thorne Industries. They had dubbed its mysterious new leader the Thorne Enforcer. Elena hated the name. It was too blunt. It lacked the precision of her new reality. She preferred the name her team used for the division, the Looking Glass. Her team was not a collection of Thorne-vetted Ivy League MBAs. Elena had built her division with surgical precision, recruiting the other people who had been cast out. Her second in command was Leo Glitch Kim, a 24-year-old coding prodigy. Leo had been working as a barista after the FTC blacklisted him for unauthorized penetration testing. He had discovered a critical zero-day exploit in the Federal Reserve's wire transfer system, and instead of being thanked was accused of attempted cyber terrorism. Elena had found him in a coffee shop in Queens, hired him, and gave him a server farm that would make the NSA jealous. Her chief analyst was Dr. Anna Sharma, a 50-year-old behavioral psychologist. Dr. Sharma had been a rising star at Quantico, a profiler for the FBI's white-collar crime unit, until she published a paper arguing that the psychology of high-finance fraud was indistinguishable from clinical sociopathy. She had been deemed anti-capitalist and hostile to the Bureau's partners and relegated to a basement office. Elena gave her a budget and access to the executive board's personality profiles. Her team of 20 was a collection of such people. The brilliant, the obsessed, the righteous, and the wronged. They weren't just accountants. They were ghost hunters. We have a problem, Leo said, walking into Elena's glass office without knocking. He wasn't wearing shoes, just socks. and he held a tablet like it was an extension of his arm. Clear's throat. Project Silver Verde. It's clean. Elena looked up from a file. No, it's not. Elena, I'm serious, Leo said, swiping on his tablet and casting the image to her wall monitor. I've run every diagnostic. The company, Silver Verde, is a Brazilian green energy firm. Their patents are real. Their land deeds in the Amazon are verified. Their cash flow is immaculate. The regular M&A team loves it. They've cleared it for a $50 million seed investment. It's too clean, Elena said, standing up. Perfection is the best place to hide a lie. What did Anna say? That's the weird part, Leo said. She profiled the CEO, a man named Henrique Bastos. He's not a VS. He's not a Vulov. He's a legitimate environmental scientist. He's a true believer. Elena walked to the main operations floor, her team watching her. Pull up the financials again, Leo. Not the ones they sent us. The ones you found. Already did. I cracked their internal service. Their ledgers match the public EF facing ones to the decimal point. It's the most boring ethical company I've ever seen. It's squeaky clean. Elena stared at the board, her mind racing. It felt wrong. It felt like the perfect setup. What if the company isn't the lie? What if the investment is? She turned to Anna. You said Bastos is a true believer. What is his psychological weakness? Anna, who had been listening from her desk, spoke up. He's an idealist. He's arrogant in his mission. He believes his work is so important, it justifies anything. He's the kind of man who would partner with a devil to build a heaven. Elena snapped her fingers. The partner. Who is their other partner? Not the public ones, the silent one. Leo's fingers flew across his keyboard. He's good, Leo muttered. He's really good. The funding is coming from a holding company in the Netherlands, which is owned by a trust in the Cayman Islands, Elena finished, her blood going cold. The same structure as MJV Capital. Yeah, Leo said, his voice grim. How did you know? Because they wanted us to find it, Elena said, a horrifying realization dawning on her. This isn't a repeat. It's an escalation. Get me Marcus. Now this, she realized, was the twist. This wasn't a simple bust-out like Vulov's. This was something far more insidious. An hour later, Marcus Thorne was in their war room, staring at the main screen. Clear's throat. The regular M&A team that had approved the deal stood in the back, pale and sweating. The company Silva Verde is real, Elena explained, pacing in front of the board like a general. The patents are real. The mission is real. That's what makes this so brilliant. But the CEO, Bastos, needed more money than any ethical fund would give him. So he made a deal. She pointed to a name she had just written on the board. Blackwood Capital. The M&A team audibly gasped. Blackwood was Thorne Industries' chief competitor, a ruthless trillion-dollar private equity firm run by a man named Alistair Finch. Blackwood Capital is the silent partner, Elena said, her voice sharp. They funded Silva Verde through an illegal offshore entity. They knew Bastos was a true believer and used his idealism against him. And now they are exiting their position by selling their stake to us. One of the M&A VPs spoke up, his voice trembling. But it's a good investment. The company is profitable. We would make money. Yes, Elena snapped. You would for about 6 months. And then Blackwood, which I remind you still has a man on Silver Verde's board, would have its Brazilian government contacts declare the land deeds environmentally invalid. The company would go to zero overnight. We would lose our $50 million. But that's not the goal. She turned to Marcus. It's a trap, a reputation bomb. Alistair Finch wants to be able to go to the Financial Times and say that Thor Industries was so greedy it knowingly invested in a fraudulent Brazilian company that was destroying the rainforest, a company that he had the good sense to pull out of. He's not after our money, he's after our name. He clears throat, wants to be us. This wasn't a fraud, it was an assassination. The room was dead silent, and Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They knew we had a new internal risk division. They wanted me to find this. They made the trail just complex enough to be a test. They're testing our defenses. They're testing me. This was their opening shot. Marcus Thorne stared at the board, at the intricate web of lies. Elena and her team had unraveled in 6 hours. A web his own team had blissfully walked into. He looked at Elena, and for the first time he smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. "This is excellent, Miss Petrova," he said. "Truly excellent. You've not only saved us $50 million in a public relations nightmare, you've given us a weapon." "Sir, we're not going to kill the deal," Marcus said, his eyes glittering. "We are going to buy Silver Verde, the whole thing." Elena was stunned. "But we're not buying it from Bastos," Marcus said. "We're going to use your report. We're going to leak your findings anonymously, of course, to the SEC and the Brazilian authorities. We will force the government to open an investigation into Blackwood's illegal offshore funding. Alistair Finch will be forced to divest his entire position to avoid prosecution. He'll have to sell it for pennies on the dollar just to look clean. And guess who will be there, waiting to buy up a billion-dollar green energy company for pennies?" Elena finally understood this was the real game. Clear his throat. This was the world Marcus lived in, and she had just given him the ammunition. "Find me Alistair Finch's weakness, Elena," Marcus said. "You've proven you can find fraud. Now I want you to find leverage." It was 6 more months, a year to the day since the night at the Sovereign. The Financial Times headline that morning read, "Thorn Industries acquires Silva Verde in $500 Atlantis deal. Rival Finch forced out by regulatory probe." Elena was in her office, the lights low, the city glittering below. Her team had gone home. The war was for tonight quiet. Robert Davies had been sentenced to 10 years. Julian Vance was in a medium security prison, having had his sentence lightened for cooperating against Vulov. Sergei Vulov himself had vanished. His extradition had been blocked by the Moldovan government, and he was now a financial specter. A ghost story, men like Marcus told. But his assets were frozen. He was a king without a kingdom. There was a soft knock. Marcus Thorne came in holding a single elegant takeout bag from the Sovereign. Clear's throat. "I was in the neighborhood," he said, placing it on her desk. It smelled of truffle and warm bread. "You're working too hard. The numbers don't sleep, Marcus," she said, leaning back in her chair. "No," he agreed. He looked around the office at the glowing screens filled with data on Blackwood Capital's other holdings. "It suits you much better than the old uniform." "It has its perks," Elena said. "The shoes are definitely more comfortable." They shared a small smile. The dynamic was different now. Not just boss and employee, they were allies. "I saw Alistair Finch at the opera last night," Marcus said, his voice casual. He wouldn't make eye contact. "I hear he's calling you Pandora. He says you opened a box that should have stayed shut. I hate the nicknames." Elena said, "This one you might like," Marcus said. "My security team has been monitoring chatter from Blackwood's analysts. They don't call you the Enforcer or Pandora. Their internal code name for you is Titan because you see everything and you sink everything you touch." Elena was quiet. 25 years for Julian," Marcus said, his tone shifting. 10 for Davies. "It's over." "It's not over," Elena said, looking out the window. "It's just the next chapter. We stopped Vance. We stopped Finch. But there will be another one tomorrow. There's always another lie. And you'll be here to find it," Marcus finished. He nodded, satisfied. He turned to leave. "Marcus," she called out. He stopped at the door. "Thank you," she said. "You gave me a chance when no one else would." Marcus looked at her, his expression one he reserved only for her. "You misunderstand the transaction, Elena. You gave me a chance. You reminded me that the most valuable asset in any room isn't the one on the balance sheet. It's the one person brave enough to tell the truth." And Elena replied, turning back to her screen, "The most dangerous liability is the man who believes he can't be fooled." Marcus smiled. "Good night, Titan." He left, closing the door behind him. Clear's throat. Elena sat back, opening the bag from the Sovereign. She was no longer a ghost, no longer a waitress. She was the one who hunted the ghosts. And in this city of blinding, beautiful lies, she was the only one who could see in the dark. That night, a $100 million catastrophe was stopped, not by a CEO or a banker, but by a waitress who had lost everything except her integrity. Elena Petrova's story is a powerful reminder that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. She saw something wrong, And even though it terrified her, she spoke up. She didn't just save a billionaire's company, she reclaimed her own life and got the justice she deserved. What do you think is the most powerful part of Elena's story? Her forensic skill or her incredible courage? Let us know in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And for more incredible true stories of courage and justice, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's next. No,